Hi Chima. Now I will focus on cells that are grouped into plant tissues. Plants are also multicellular organisms, and of course there will be cells that will be having similar function, and these cells will be organized, will be grouped into a particular type of tissue in the plants. For example, in the plants there will be cells known as tracheids and also vessel elements which are usually involved in transporting water. And these cells will be grouped together to form a special tissue known as the xylem tissue. This diagram shows the types of plant tissues that we need to learn. The first one will be the meristem tissue, which consists of the apical meristem and the lateral meristem. Generally, this will consist of cells that are actively dividing, and they will be important for the growth of the plant. Next will be the ground tissue, and this type of tissue can be important in the packing of the plant or giving support for the plant. There are three types of ground tissues. The first one will be the parenchyma tissue, second one will be the collenchyma tissue, and the third type will be the sclerenchyma tissue. And the third type of plant tissue will be the vascular tissue, which is usually involved in the transport in the plants. And there are two types. If the vascular tissue is transporting water, then this will be referring to the xylem tissue. Meanwhile, if the vascular tissue is transporting photosynthetic substance such as the sucrose, then this should be referring to the phloem tissue. Now let's start with the meristem tissue. As I've told you earlier, this consists of actively dividing meristem cells, which constantly doing the process of mitosis. The cells are usually small, and they have thin cell wall, and the cells will be closely packed with each other. The general function is for growth, and there are two types of meristem tissue, the apical meristem and also the lateral meristem. The apical meristem will be found normally at the tips of the roots or maybe the tip of the shoots. This will be allowing the plant to grow either deeper into the soil or growing further upwards due to the growth of the shoots. Another type will be the lateral meristem, in which there will be meristem cells located at the cambium. This will allow the growth of the stem for the plant. Now let's move on to the ground tissues. And the first type will be the parenchyma tissue, which consists of the living parenchyma cells. Since the parenchyma cells are living cells, they will be having nucleus and other organelles as well. And one thing that we need to focus will be on the cell wall of the plant cell. These parenchyma cells will be having thin primary cell wall, which is made up of cellulose, hemicellulose, and also pectin. You should notice that there will be no secondary cell wall for these parenchyma cells. And the cells will be arranged loosely, and that is why we will be able to see large intercellular spaces between the cells of the parenchyma tissue. This parenchyma tissue will be the basic packing tissue for the plants. This parenchyma tissue is usually found in the cortex region or even in the pith area. And some of the parenchyma cells will be modified to form the epidermis layer, and some will be modified into mesophyll cells, which are very important for the process of photosynthesis in the leaf area. The second type of ground tissue will be the collenchyma tissue. This consists of living collenchyma cells, and the cell will be having an evenly thickened primary cell wall. Usually, the thickening of the cell wall will be at the corners of the cell. There should be no secondary wall for the parenchyma cell as well. The cells are closely packed to each other, and so there will be less intercellular spaces between the cells of this parenchyma tissue. Generally, this parenchyma tissue is important to provide support for the herbaceous plants, and we can also say that this provides support for part of the plants that are still growing. We can find this type of parenchyma tissue usually below the epidermis layer. The third type of the ground tissue will be the parenchyma tissue, which consists of parenchyma cells which are dead when they reach their maturity. And another unique thing about these parenchyma cells is that they will be having this another layer of wall that we call as the secondary wall. And the secondary wall of the parenchyma cells will be very thick, which are thickened by a substance known as lignin. The cells are tightly packed to each other, and so there will be no intercellular spaces at all within this parenchyma tissue. Generally, this parenchyma tissue will provide support for the woody plants, and we can also say that they provide support for part of the plants that have stopped growing. There are two types of parenchyma cells actually. One can be known as the scarids, and some can be known as the fibers. The fibers is usually found in the stem of the woody plants. Meanwhile, the scarids is usually found covering the nuts or maybe the seeds of certain plants. And another type of the tissue in the plants will be the vascular tissue, which usually involves in the transport in the plants. The first type will be the xylem tissue. This tissue mainly consists of cells known as the tracheids and also the vessel elements. These cells are dead cells in which they will not be having any nucleus or any other organelles. What's left will be the cell wall only, and you should notice that there will be a secondary wall for the cells of the xylem, and the secondary wall will be very thick due to the lignin. The general function of the xylem tissue is to transport water in the plants. The second type of the vascular tissue will be the phloem tissue. This phloem tissue mainly consists of the sieve tube element over here. This will be the structure that is very important to transport the sucrose or any other photosynthetic products, in which the process of transporting photosynthetic products will be known as translocation. Another type of the important cell in this phloem tissue will be the companion cell, and this cell actually supports the activities of the sieve tube element. And so, this will be all about the plant tissues. We will continue again with some other lessons in some other time. Bye bye.